America built 48,000 miles of interstate to connect the country. But before DNA, databases, and cameras, these highways allowed killers to move faster than law enforcement could communicate. This is Interstate, highly deadly, and you are listening to Deadly Truths with Becca. In my first episode, I talked about Robert Ben Rhodes, the truck stop killer. And the truth is, we will probably never know how many people he really murdered, but that is exactly the point. This was a window in time. Nobody built America's interstate system thinking this will make murder easier. Nobody looked at thousands of miles of open road and thought, what a perfect way to kill somebody, disappear and dump the body 3 states away. Most people would never think that way, but we are not talking about most people. Where ordinary people saw progress, speed, and connection, predators saw opportunity. For decades, the highways were sold to Americans as symbols of freedom. They were how you visited family for Thanksgiving, how you loaded up the kids and drove to the Grand Canyon in the summer, how food and freight moved across the country, how America stayed connected. But for a brief and terrifying stretch of time, those same roads also created the perfect hunting ground for killers who could move faster than law enforcement could communicate. And the country did not fully confront that reality until 2004, when the FBI formally launched what became the Highway Serial Killings Initiative. By then, the pattern was already there. Bodies had been showing up near interstates for years. Jane Doe, John Doe, women and men were discarded on embankments, in ditches, off frontage roads, behind truck stops, and along exit ramps, like their lives meant nothing. The highways gave killers exactly what they needed: anonymity, mobility, and distance. A man like Ted Bundy could kill in one state and keep moving. A man like the Grim Sleeper could pick up vulnerable women, murder them, and disappear back into the noise of a city or onto another route. The I-70 shooter could pull off the interstate, shoot a clerk in the head, and vanish back onto the road. Some were caught, many were not. Robert Ben Rhodes was not superhuman. He was perfectly matched to his era. A trucking job, an anonymous highway system, and weak communication between jurisdictions gave him room to hunt. In today's world, that room is a lot smaller, which is why I wanted to cover him in the first episode. The most disturbing cases are not the ones where we know there was one monster. They are the ones where the evidence suggests there may have been many. The Redhead Murders are not one clean case. They are a scatter of bodies, women mostly found near highways, mostly with reddish or auburn hair, spread across several states and years. The label itself came later. What investigators had in real time was something uglier and less organized, a pattern they could feel before they could prove it. By 1985, police from multiple states had formed a task force because too many women with similar appearances were being found dumped along major roads in the South and lower Midwest for it to feel random. Even then, authorities were never sure whether they were chasing one killer, several killers, or a whole era of predators using the same highway system. What connected these cases was not just hair color. It was geography, vulnerability, and disposal. Bodies turned up near interstates and truck routes. Several victims appeared to be living unstable lives, estranged from family, hitchhiking, or moving through truck stop corridors. That matters because it explains both why they were vulnerable and why they stayed unidentified so long. These were the exact kinds of women who could disappear into the seams of America in the early 1980s and not be immediately matched to a missing person report hundreds of miles away. One of the clearest known victims was Tina Marie McKinney Farmer, found on January 1st, 1985, down an embankment off southbound Interstate 75 in Campbell County, Tennessee. She had been bound and strangled. For years, she was just another Jane Doe. Then in 2018, she was identified through fingerprints after an analyst tracked down an old fingerprint card from Indiana. In 2019, DNA evidence led investigators to Jerry Leon Johns, a trucker who had already been convicted after attacking another red-haired woman in Tennessee in a strikingly similar way, binding her, strangling her, and dumping her along Interstate 40. A grand jury concluded Johns would have been indicted for Farmer's murder if he had still been alive. That is where the story gets both stronger and messier. Tina Farmer gives investigators one hard anchor. At least one victim in this cluster was killed by a real mobile offender tied to Tennessee highways. But one solved killing does not solve the whole pattern. It only proves that the pattern was not imagined. Another victim was Michelle Lavone Inman of Nashville. Her skeletal remains were found in March 1985 near Interstate 24 in Cheatham County, Tennessee. For decades, she was another nameless woman on the edge of the road. In 2023, forensic genetic genealogy identified her. That gave her back her name, her age, and her city. What it did not give investigators was her killer. Investigators are still asking for information about who she was with before her death. That is the central tragedy of these cases now. DNA is reviving the victims faster than it is solving the murders. Then there is Tracy Sue Walker, a 15-year-old from Lafayette, Indiana. Her partial skeletal remains were found in April 1985 in the Big Wheel Gap area of Campbell County, Tennessee, not far from where Tina Farmer was found. For years, she was known only as Baby Girl. She was eventually identified in 2022 after earlier attempts failed because the remains were too degraded. Investigators still do not know exactly how she died or how she ended up there. Tracy complicates the neat version of the Redhead murders because she was younger than the other commonly cited victims and because the cause of death was never firmly established. She fits the geography, but not the clean stereotype. In Mississippi, another long unnamed victim finally came back into focus as Lori Ann Mueller Pennell. Her body was found in January 1985 off Highway 78 in Olive Branch, just east of the Coldwater River Bridge. She had light red to blonde hair. Investigators ruled the case a homicide. In 2024, advanced DNA testing identified her nearly 40 years later. The follow-up investigation showed she had last been seen at a West Memphis truck stop in 1982. That detail matters. It drops her directly into the same truck stop and highway ecosystem that keeps surfacing in these cases. But again, identity did not produce a killer. Earlier victims show the same pattern. Lisa Nichols, a 28-year-old West Virginia woman with strawberry blonde hair, was found strangled along Interstate 40 near West Memphis, Arkansas, in September 1984. She was identified within months, but her case still sits inside the larger unanswered pattern. Another victim, Regina Pilgrim, was found in April 1985 in Knox County, Kentucky, stuffed inside a white refrigerator left by the roadside. She was identified decades later. Her case is often grouped with the Redhead murders because of timing, appearance, and disposal. But even there, the fit is imperfect. The method and staging were more theatrical, almost personalized. And that is the real problem with the Redhead murders as a theory. The similarities are obvious enough to be haunting, but the differences are too big to ignore. Some women were strangled. Some causes of death were unknown. Some were clothed. Others were partially clothed or nude. Some were pregnant. Ages ranged from a teenager like Tracy Walker to adult women in their 20s and possibly older. The highway corridors overlap, but the body disposal methods do not always match. Even in 1985, when states asked the FBI for help, investigators were dealing with inconsistencies in clothing, sexual assault evidence, and circumstances. That is why the phrase Redhead Murders is useful, but dangerous. Useful because it captures a real atmosphere. Red-haired women, interstate corridors, truck stops, abandonment, and decades of namelessness. Dangerous because it can imply a single mastermind when the evidence may point to something worse. Not one monster, but multiple men exploiting the same blind spots in the same era. Even the recent research only argues there is strong evidence that a subset of victims may connect to Jerry Johns or to one shared offender. It does not prove that every case in the cluster belongs to the same hand. So what did DNA tell us? It told us these women were real. They had names: Farmer, Inman, Walker, Pinnell, Pilgrim, Nichols. They were not just sketches, wigs on foam heads, or morgue estimates. Work gave families answers that law enforcement could not give them in 1985. What could DNA not tell us? The full shape of the evil. It cannot automatically explain who picked them up, whether one trucker became many murders, whether several killers copied the same opportunity structure, or how many more women belong in the pattern but are still unnamed. It has given the dead their names back. It has not, in most of these cases, given the living the man who killed them. That is why this story still sticks. The Redhead Murders are not just about a serial killer. They are about an America that built fast roads before it built fast communication, and a period when women could vanish into the highway system so completely that even when their bodies were found, their identities did not follow them. The deeper horror is not only that someone did this, it is that for a while the country made it frighteningly easy. Red hair was rare enough to stand out. That means one of two things: either somebody was hunting a type, or America saw a rare trait, repeated often enough that it could no longer pretend the pattern was random. And the truth is, whoever killed these women could still be alive. If the person responsible was, say, in his 20s, 30s, or 40s when these murders happened in the early to mid-1980s, he would most likely be somewhere in his 60s, 70s, or 80s now. Maybe dead, maybe in prison for something else. Maybe he lived an ordinary-looking life and carried this in silence for decades. That is part of what makes this story so disturbing. We are not just talking about ghosts from another era. We may be talking about a real man who walked away from this, aged out of suspicion, and kept going. But it is also important to say this clearly. Truckers are not the problem. Trucking is not the problem. My own dad was a trucker in the 1980s, and as far as I know, he was not out there murdering anybody. Most truck drivers then and now are hardworking people doing a brutal job, long hours, bad sleep, endless roads, just trying to make a living and get home. It was never the job. It was the opportunity. The interstate system gave certain predators exactly what they needed: movement, anonymity, distance, and vulnerable people crossing their path. Most truckers saw a paycheck. Some sick men saw a hunting ground. And that is the difference. The road did not make them evil. The job did not make them killers. It just gave the wrong person the right conditions. So let's step back and look at another killer, one that probably wasn't a trucker by profession. He could have been, of course, but he is a perfect example of a mobile killer who loved the highway for all the wrong reasons. The I-70 killer did not need a basement, a torture chamber, or some grand serial killer mythology. He needed an exit ramp, a strip mall, and a woman working alone on a slow afternoon. That is what makes this case feel so mean, so stripped down, no theatrical nonsense. Just a man moving through the Midwest in April and May of 1992, killing 6 store clerks in Indiana, Kansas, and Missouri in under a month, then vanishing back into traffic like he was never there. The confirmed victims were Robin Fuldauer in Indianapolis on April 8th, Patricia Majors and Patricia Smith in Wichita on April 11th, Michael McMccown and Tara Hote on April 27th, Nancy Kitzmiller in St. Charles on May 3rd, and Sarah Blessing in Raytown on May 7th. Ballistics tied the murders together. The weapon was almost certainly unusual. Investigators have pointed to the Irma work ET-22 as the most probable match, while saying an Intratec Scorpion could not be ruled out. The killer was described by witnesses as a slender white man, roughly 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 9 inches, with dull or reddish hair. In 2021, police released age-progressed sketches and said that if he is still alive, he would now be roughly in his 50s to 70s. And here is the part that matters. Police still have not publicly identified a real named suspect in the I-70 killer case, not a confirmed one, not a guy they can stand behind. There are theories, profiles, and arguments, but no official answer. What investigators do seem to believe is that he was organized enough to work a routine, mobile enough to move fast, and familiar enough with retail timing to know when these little specialty stores would be quiet and vulnerable. One profiler, as relayed by journalist Bob Cyphers, believed the murders may have functioned almost like a fantasy ritual for him, planned in advance, quickly executed, then over in a rush. The same reporting also notes investigators' belief that he may have had an emotional attachment to that oddball old gun, possibly because it came from family. That profile makes more sense than the Hollywood version. This does not look like a drifter just randomly snapping. It looks like somebody who understood rhythm. He appears to have worked the highway like a musician who only knew one ugly song and played it over and over. Drive, exit, scan, enter, kill, leave, minimal conversation, minimal theft, no sexual assault, no prolonged scene, no chaos, just a fast, intimate execution in places society barely notices. Shoe stores, bridal shops, craft and gift stores, places coded as soft, safe, feminine, places people walked into because they needed a pair of shoes or ribbon or wedding supplies, not because they expected to die under fluorescent lights. The play-by-play based on the pattern is brutally simple. He likely cruised near interstate access businesses until he found the right setup. Small store, thin foot traffic, one clerk alone or mostly alone, easy exit back to the road. He goes in looking ordinary enough not to trigger instant alarm. Maybe he browses for a second. Maybe he asks a question. Maybe he waits until the clerk turns, bends, walks toward the back, or lets him close the distance. Then he shoots, usually in the back of the head. In at least some cases, the victim wound up in a back room or rear area, which suggests either he moved them there or exploited the layout once they were out of public view. Then he takes a tiny amount of cash, if any, and leaves. That tiny theft matters because it makes the robbery look almost like stage dressing. The money was never the point. It was cover, or habit, or just something to do with his hands after the real act was done. The Wichita bridal shop murders show how close this thing came to becoming even worse. Investigators believe the killer may have assumed only one woman was inside. Instead, Patricia Magers and Patricia Smith were both there after closing, waiting for a man to pick up a cummerbund. That customer arrived and reportedly came face to face with the killer, who had a gun and told him to come to the back. The man refused. The killer told him to leave. It is one of those moments that chills you because it suggests the murderer was not improvising in panic. He was managing the scene, adjusting on the fly, still trying to keep control. Cold, functional, no movie monster speech, just Midwest death with the volume turned low. The case also explains why people still argue over who he must have been. Some think he had to be a salesman, delivery driver, or someone whose life naturally put him on the road. Maybe, but there is no public proof of that. What we can say is that he understood geography. Police came to believe one man committed the crimes because the same gun kept reappearing across multiple states in a matter of days. That tells you he was comfortable moving, comfortable navigating, and comfortable disappearing into an America that, in 1992, was a lot easier to hide inside. And that is why this probably would not fly the same way now. Not because evil got tired. Evil never gets tired. But the environment changed. Investigators on the revived task force specifically pointed to advances like touch DNA. as a reason to reopen the case. And federal guidance today emphasizes collecting body swabs and trace evidence because it can matter in homicide work. On top of that, modern investigations operate in a world of better surveillance, more store cameras, digital payment trails, cell phone location data, and automated plate reader systems that can capture and compare vehicle plates in seconds. In 1992, a man could move store to store and state to state with a lot less electronic friction. Today, he would still be dangerous, but he would be shedding data every mile. That does not mean he would be caught quickly. It means the old trick. Get off the highway, kill in 20 seconds, get back on the highway, become just another car under a washed-out Midwestern sky would be harder to pull off clean. Back then, he hunted in the seams of ordinary life. That is the horror of it. Not Gothic castles, not foggy cemeteries, a bridal shop, a shoe store, a gift shop off the interstate while everybody else was buying gas, smoking in the car, and heading home. And somewhere out there, unless he is dead, is the man who figured out that in 1992 America, anonymity was not just a condition, it was a weapon. Maybe the real story was never just red hair, and it was never just I-70. Those were the details we could see, the label, the route, the pattern, the parts that made chaos feel organized enough to name. But underneath all of it is something colder. Women and men moving through ordinary America, working, hitching rides, trying to survive, trying to get somewhere, trying to build a life, were disappearing into spaces the country barely noticed. Highways, exit ramps, small stores, truck stops, back roads, places built for movement, not memory. We should understand that it is not that every case is connected. Not that every redheaded victim belonged to one killer, not that every road led back to the same man. It is that the American road itself created opportunity. For the people they hunted, it became a place where vulnerability could be mistaken for invisibility. A woman alone, a clerk alone, a transient woman, a woman no one reported missing fast enough, a woman reduced to hair color, socks, a job title, a body off the shoulder. And that is what should bother us. Because the most frightening men in these stories did not need genius. They did not need a dungeon or a master plan. They just needed a system full of gaps. Gaps in policing, in technology, in media attention, in how this country valued certain people over others. And that is the part people still do not fully grasp. This is not just about the killers we know. It is about the ones we do not. The ones who were never identified, never connected, never caught. It is about the decades between the birth of the interstate system and the early 2000s, when the number of unidentified bodies found near American highways became impossible to ignore. Now,